Lovely listeners, I recognise you all. You are all back down the red rabbit hole, eager and willing to listen to the next episode with our guest author, L.J. Shepherd, otherwise known as Laura. And of course, with me still is Lisa Shepherd. Any relation, ladies?
Yeah, it's spelt the same as well, isn't it? Laura, do you have an affinity with sheep?
I guess so. I mean, I live in Wales now, so I must have sort of done some sort of home pigeoning. But I sort of have an irrational hatred of anybody who spells their name differently, only because it has resulted in people always
Yeah,
spelling my name
yeah.
incorrectly. But it's totally irrational. I'm sure if I was to meet them and get to know them, I'd be okay with them. But
Absolutely. Ours is the way you spell it, and anyone who else spells it differently is wrong, frankly.
I feel like you two are going to be like a two-member
Yeah.
cult or something. The
We have our
Shepherds.
own manifesto. Shepherd, I
Yeah.
always say shepherd is in terms of the kind who herd sheep. That's how I say. That's how you spell it.
Yeah.
Not the shepherd or the shepherd or the double P.
I used to be a bit aggressive and just say yeah, it's the way it's spelt. Correctly.
It's just the way it is.
I always get asked about my name, and it's like peacock, like the bird. There's not really many ways you can spell that. I mean, Nicky, fair enough, I spell it with a Y, but
You
still.
can spell it peacock with two E's. Peacock.
Maybe. I quite like that. Peacocky. I can add an EY on the end. Peacocky.
Anyway, I attempted some sound effects then for my horse.
You did.
It's not
I
very
can't
good,
get
is
off
it?
your
It's not very
recording.
good. Oh,
No.
well, yeah, I've just ruined the recording
I'm kidding.
now.
It's fine.
But it is just a mug. I haven't got coconuts.
No, but you were getting on your high horse, Lisa, so saddle up and
I
ride.
was getting on my high horse. I was. So we were talking about David Copeland and Timothy McVeigh, who are both people who were convicted of bombings that were motivated by sort of fascist ideas, in fact, anti-government and racist fascist ideas. Both had read the Turner Diaries, and what interested me when I was looking at both of them is that they were both sort of suggested that they had a slightly higher than average IQ, which made me think, well, how come? Maybe that is a conspiracy theory in itself, and somebody said that to make it more likely that perhaps they could have done this themselves. Because if you go back and listen to part 1 of this podcast, you'll hear that actually there were plenty of things they didn't get right, which were perhaps might indicate their IQ level isn't as high as it suggests. But what stood out to me is I can kind of see these young men as young people in school, and I think because they had a high IQ, their scores, what they were getting, how they were progressing in their education, nothing would have flagged up really if they kind of kept their head down and sat quietly. And I think David Copeland even said, in school nobody would have known who I was. My teachers didn't know who I was, because I think if a child doesn't kind of behaviorally act out, and that they are achieving where our expectations set out they should achieve in the national curriculum, nobody does really notice. We don't holistically kind of explore our children's needs. I think we try, but I think our education system isn't set up for it. So I think they just go under the radar, and nobody, you notice if a child shouts out in class and doesn't do what they're told, or if they are falling behind their peers in terms of their academic development, but you're not really looking to see, are they actually making friends in the playground? How are they thinking about other people? We don't kind of pay enough. I know there's PSHE, but we don't pay enough attention to social development, or perhaps the things that they are consuming. If they are getting hold of really dangerous propaganda, like things like the Turner Diaries, or I think very easily other content online, and they are very vulnerable to these cases. Maybe think a little bit about the Shamima Begum case, and how she has been vilified. But I think everybody forgets she was 15 when she left. She was a child when she left, and she was radicalized.
Yeah, that's a case, I guess, that was in my mind when I was writing this as well. Stupidly, I got into a Facebook argument with somebody about it, and I probably shouldn't have done. But it was just how easily people are manipulated into sort of hating certain people. And I'm not saying that like we should be saying that Shamima Begum is a brave and amazing woman or anything. Absolutely not. I think she should be condemned, for what she did. She was 15. She probably was what's known as Gillick competent in law. So she still deserves some sort of, punishment potentially, but to disown her as our problem, that's what I find so awful about it. She was
Mm.
radicalized here in the UK, and the more we sort of push these people away and say, oh, they're not allowed a British passport anymore, and all of these sorts of things, and sort of say she's not our problem, we're just gonna get rid of her citizenship, the more other young people who are potentially, vulnerable to be radicalized are going to look at how the government has treated her and go, why the hell am I going to be loyal to this government? What are they going to do as soon as I step over the mark? They're just going to disown me, not consider me their problem anymore. So I was really worried about that case, and just how common it was for people to think it's okay, and that she should just be totally hated, rather than a more balanced view of, well, she was a child who was radicalized, and what she went through after that was absolutely horrendous.
I think all these people who say, she knew what she was doing, she was 15, and of course, Gillick competence relates to the Victoria Gillick case, in which she managed to, she wanted to get products from the doctor, didn't she? And her mum said she couldn't,
Yeah.
but the doctor said she could. I think those people who can suggest that, oh, I wouldn't be taken in by that. I would, she knew what she was doing. They should check with themselves. Have you bought anything online that maybe you regretted afterwards, or you thought, why did I buy that? Why? Yes, but also just, I did a bit of a study about this, about critical media literacy. There's quite an interesting guy called David Buckingham who writes about it, and he looks at the four areas in which, all this media stuff is designed and created to make us go and buy these things, like, or not buy these things, or to buy in to maybe ideologies or ideas online, which could be extremist ideas.
There's a lot of dark psychology out there. I mean, having worked in sales for all that time, I know there are certain techniques and dark NLP techniques that can be used to sucker people in at the end of the day. Although I don't abide by a lot of them, they're very, very effective, unfortunately, especially if someone is looking for answers, which I think, unfortunately, a lot of these kind of souls are that end up in these positions. They're looking for answers. They're looking for meaning in their life, or I suppose, a reason as to why their life is the way it is. I mean, again, sort of harkening back to the incels, they're looking for that, and therefore they are easy targets, easy prey for the kind of people that are peddling the solutions, in inverted
We all
commas.
do that, don't we? If you ever looked up something medical online and you are literally
Yeah.
just seeking the answer that you're looking for, that either says, yes, you're going to die, go to the doctor, or no, it's fine, this happens. And as soon as you find the answer, you stop looking.
Also, we wanted to touch upon the occult panic in the 1990s. This is especially interesting to me, or satanic panic, I guess, in the 90s, because it is such a massive rabbit hole.
We glorify the 90s a bit, don't we? In my head. But actually, looking at all of this, it was awful. It was a terrible
It
time.
weren't great. The fashion alone.
I glorify the 90s. I was born in the early 90s, and there's a funny thing, which is this kind of like nostalgia for the time that you don't really remember, because I'd have been, I mean, I wasn't even born when Nevermind came out, but I love Nirvana and all of these things. But this actually, I don't think, is unique to my generation, of having this nostalgia for the 90s, when really our nostalgia is for the early noughties, because my parents have the same thing about the 60s. They were born in the late 50s, and so they would really not have properly experienced the 60s. They weren't old enough to be going to see the Beatles and stuff like that. But they love it. They love watching television programs about the 60s, and they say, oh yes, I remember that. I'm like, do you actually? Because you would have been 10. Yeah, but it is interesting, isn't it? That sort of that love for the time, and I think the main reason have this enormous amount of nostalgia for the 90s is just it's pre-internet, pre-social media, and that for me is what sort of makes it such a, I don't know, rose-tinted
Can't
time.
wait for Generation Z to kind of be glorifying now. I don't think there's anything glorious about now, but they might be able to. Will it be Generation Z or will it be the next? It'll be the next generation. What's the current?
What they go back to A?
I don't know. Where do they go after this? They do have a name, the kind of children being born now, in terms. I'm going to look it up. I'll look it up. You carry on. You carry on
Okay.
occulting.
I will cult away. So, Laura, the case that I kind of wanted to bring up, which I'm sure you're well aware of, is the Memphis Three.
Oh, I don't know about that actually, but yeah, I'm excited to hear about it. Yeah.
Well, it needs several podcasts to kind of sort it out, and I'm sure you can find it out there. But just as a little kind of, I suppose, a little synopsis, you've got little boys in Memphis that go off on their bikes one day and don't come back. And people start looking for them, obviously their parents. And this is in 1993, by the way, 5th of May, 1993. And all their parents and step-parents, they go out looking for them. And unfortunately, their bodies are found in I think it's like a creek or a river.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of hog-tied up. And there's marks on their bodies. And very, very quickly, it's assumed it's an occult case. Because
Right.
there are, not to go into the grisly details, but there are parts of the boys' anatomies that are missing
Mm-hmm.
that are believed to be used in occult ceremonies.
Right.
Unfortunately, within this small town community, there are 3 heavy metal pagans, let's call them,
Right. Okay.
minding their own business. And suddenly the town is obviously up in arms because the boys have been killed, and the spotlight falls on these 3 lads. They were basically railroaded, and then they were tried and put away. And a lot of evidence has come out later to say that there was DNA found on the boys were tied with shoelaces. There was DNA on the shoelaces that certainly didn't belong to the boys, and that a lot of the parts that were missing and the marks on the boys had been caused by turtles in the creek.
What? Oh
So
my
it
God.
was post-mortem rather than, pre-mortem.
That's so interesting. Particularly as I'm a big fan of heavy metal. So growing up again in the early noughties, it was all about Slipknot and I love Bring Me the Horizon and all of these sorts of things. And again, David Copeland is supposed to have loved heavy metal music, and people called him like Angry Dave or whatever. And yeah, I find that sort of connection really odd because like my experience of growing up, I lived near Birmingham, which is a pretty cool place if you like metal music because of it's got some good bars, and that's where Black Sabbath came from. And there was this big event called Subculture, and it was the politest, nicest place you could go. Like if you were, I've never been somebody to go in a mosh pit because I'm 5'3" and would get trampled. But I've got friends that love it, and they all smile and hug afterwards after it's a really, really sort of welcoming environment. And then to sort of know that it's got this connection with the occult and potentially even the far right is just like, yeah, it's really upsetting.
I mean, with the Memphis Three, there was a lot of actually quite famous metal bands, if you look online, that campaigned on their behalves, because it was because of the metal music that they were basically railroaded, and the fact they had some books on witchcraft. That was it. Oh, and nail varnish, I think, was the other thing that kind of set them apart. But
Oh
hey
wow.
ho.
Gosh.
But yeah, there was a lot of metal bands that had like fundraisers to help with the cause. And the last I heard, there was some sort of plea that went in for them to basically say that they could go out as long as they could like be let out of prison as long as they said they did it. But of
Right.
course, but they all had to say it. So I don't know. Everyone would have to look up online to see kind of the latest of that case. But that was the last thing I heard, and I thought, oh, I don't know how that's going to go. Because you don't want to admit to something like that if you didn't do it. If they've been innocent this whole time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's another case of othering, isn't it? Othering. And why do we look at things that maybe we don't quite understand like metal music, if you're not inside, you don't see that hugging moment, you're not inside of it. And we don't look a little bit closer at home to kind of what's happening in the government right now. Is it literally very recently on the news? I heard that Nigel Farage, who is trying to take the seat in Clacton for the Reform Party, that a member of the party said that people coming across in boats, refugees, as effectively seeking refuge, should be used for target practice.
Oh, what?
Yes, now Farage and the Reform Party have come out against it, obviously, and have condemned that being said, but that still there's people thinking that way.
But it's that thing I was saying, like I think in the last episode about the sort of it's the corporate face of all of that. And so he just takes people up to that line and then lets them go over it in their own time, sort of thing. That's what I find so insidious about it now. And again, sort of a difference potentially between these cases and what we're seeing now is that we're now in is the alt-right now. So back in the 90s, these people, as heinous and awful as they were, there's no subtlety about it. There's no subtlety about any of their views, and it's very easy to sort of label it as it is. What's happened since then is that it's all through these kind of code words, and it's through apparently legitimate concerns dressed up to whip people up until they become this angry about for example, refugees.
Yeah, I remember the language. When was that? The language that there were swarms. Remember they talked about swarms of
Yeah.
people coming, like it was some sort of. I mean, I think it's
Like an insect, like dehumanizing again, isn't it?
Yeah, but in terms of the occult thing, again, one of the things I found really weird in my research was that as much as I agree with you that we shouldn't be afraid of like witches, I mean, I loved stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, again, like 90s aesthetic. I love that whole thing of like when they used to have that whole like sun and moon like pattern, and it's all like witchy and stuff. I loved all of that.
that was in everyone's bedroom, wasn't it? That was everywhere.
Yeah, I love all of
It still is in my bedroom.
But like what's so weird about this is that with the occult stuff is that I actually found there is a real connection between the occult and the far right, in that they've sort of alighted upon it, I suppose you could say, because David Copeland was thought to have been influenced by a guy called David Myatt, who potentially wrote a load of stuff under the pseudonym of Anton Long. And he again was racist but had these overtones of like the occult, and is supposed to have set up a group called the Order of Nine Angles, which follows the left hand path. Yeah, they do like sex magic rituals, and their sort of idea of the occult and the sort of Satan worship is, as I say, to murder people. It's a really, really, really horrible group. And again, going down into the rabbit hole, I did more research into the Nazi Party and why they've got the swastika is because that was taken from the Theosophy Society, and Hitler had like the weirdest ideas. And I think that this sort of stuff doesn't get talking about as much because people it's almost comical like how stupid it is, and obviously nobody wants to sort of take away from the fact that what they did was so atrocious and so disgusting, and of course we should always focus on the sophistication of what they did. But at the same time, Hitler believed in the hollow earth theory, at least in part, to the point that he thought that they could get like these special lasers that would see. So he believed, right, that the heaven is in the center of the earth and that we're sort of on the inside of it. He thought that he could get lasers to see across to see what the Russians were doing. And Himmler, again, who was really the architect of the Holocaust, he had his own mage. Believed their idea of this Aryan race is actually it's really, when you look into it, obviously it's horrific and racist, but it's also completely mad. Like they believe there was this ancient race of like superhumans that they sort of needed to go back into that era of. It's like, that is weird. They believe in such fantastical and crazy things.
It's madness, isn't it? And Hitler, he was so into the occult, he actually asked an astrologer whether he should invade Britain. And
Yeah.
the astrologer said, no, not at this time. And if he had, he'd have won because we weren't ready then.
Yeah, it's
So it was
yeah,
down to an astrologer that we didn't
But
get
they can.
invaded at the wrong time.
yeah. I mean, I sort of rail against astrology, but now I'm thinking maybe it's quite good actually.
Well, yeah, they were on our side. You shouldn't invade Britain today. That's what mine says all the time.
My mum always sends me my horoscope on email, bless her. She really believes in all of that. She also believes in like crystal healing and things like this. And when I was younger, under my pillow, she used to put a bag of crystals. If you were to ask her like what these crystals are for, they're basically what she thinks that they basically represent all of my defects.
Oh, that's not nice.
When you think about it, because it's like this one is for friendships and this one is for, you're like, oh, thanks, mom. You don't think I'm good at making friends? Brilliant. One of them, this is really funny. One of them was for decluttering, and I was like, well, you've literally put a bag of rocks under my pillow.
Oh, I really need that one.
Every month, she gathers all of the crystals in the house up and she charges them under the light of the full moon.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, put them out in the garden and charge them.
I mean, I know a lot of people that do this, and I mean, I have crystals myself. I do think that there is something. I'm not saying it's to that degree, but I think there's something in it because everything is made up of energy, and those crystals are definitely made up of a different type of energy. And you can feel it. If so, I can feel it when I touch certain crystals. I can feel there's a slight buzz. There's something going on. And whether it's in my mind or not, I couldn't tell you. But I do think I think as everything kind of gets repackaged and
Mm.
commercialized, then you lose a lot of its kind of essence and its honesty. And you could probably say the same thing about everything. You could say it about astrology. You could say it about tarot cards or whatever you're looking at, or even spell work to a degree, or paganism. But I do think there's kind of something there. Maybe that's just me hoping that there's more to this world than what we have.
And you be careful with that their algorithm. You could end up down a
Oh no.
dangerous path. Starts with crystals, ends with
Well, yeah, luckily that wasn't, David Copeland's route into. He came at it from the far right and found, potentially found more occult stuff we don't know. But yeah, it is really weird. Like one of the groups that came forward about, potentially saying, yeah, we did the London nail bombing, was this that they called themselves the White Wolves. And so yeah, there's just this weird thing, and you can't help but just think it's a load of nerds that are just like, oh, wolves are cool. It's really weird, isn't it?
yeah, but then it's also dangerous because actually the murder of Joe Cox was not that long ago. Was it 2016, I think?
There was an ITV drama of that was really good.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah, that was really good. But it's a kind of, and that news story I was talking about before, that's literally wasn't on. I think I've heard that like today or yesterday or something. So it is. I think it's like it's a bit of a scary world out there. And if people are vulnerable, I mean, something I've talked about before, and I've just mentioned it, but the need to develop critical media literacy to be able to realize and notice, know that the algorithm is going to keep sending you stuff, and know that they're going to be trying to sell you things, and that just because a website looks really good and uses all the right kind of language and things on it doesn't mean that that is genuine and that that's real and that you should believe everything that you read online.
It's hard stuff. God, we went right down the rabbit hole.
I was worried I wasn't going to get it out, Nikki. Yes, yeah. And down the bottom of it, I just found the sun and moon bedspread of my dreams when I was growing up in the 90s, because I really wanted it. I don't think I had a full room. I don't think we could afford the full room in my in my childhood. Yeah, I only had a couple of bits. I didn't have enough. Yeah.
You only had one wall.
didn't get the curtains and bedspread set.
Yeah, you had a focus
Yes.
wall.
But just so you know, our current generation from 2013 to now are the alphas. So you were right. You were absolutely right. But I kind of looking through the generations, there are some that I feel really sorry for. Like there's like the greatest generation from 1901 to 1927, followed by the silent generation. So they were the greatest, and they kept the next lot quiet. They kept them silent. Yeah.
It's the boomers I like, because it just sounds so dramatic, doesn't it? We're the boomers. We are running out of time, listeners. So we just want to thank Laura again for coming on. Thank you, Laura.
Oh no, that's been really good fun. Thanks so
Right,
much.
we've had so much to talk about. You have to let us know when
Yes.
you've got another book out so we can all talk again.
Thank you.
So the Trials of Lila Dalton, that's out now.
Yeah, it's out now. All formats. Paperback's coming out February next year. So yeah, it's as I say, it's available in ebook and hardback now.
Excellent. With you being a barrister, have you got any? Are you working on anything new at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm editing book 2. Again, I've in this book I've gone into the sort of medical serial killer rabbit hole. So
Ooh.
that's my rabbit hole for the next book.
Oh, Harold Shipman. We've talked about him before, haven't
Yes,
we?
that was a deep rabbit hole. That was the previously deepest rabbit hole I've
Please.
been down, actually.
So, listeners, do remember to follow the Red Rabbit on all the social media platforms, and wherever you're listening to this, do subscribe. The subscription doesn't cost you anything, and with us being a new podcast, it really does help us out.
Fills us with joy and stops us being vulnerable to being influenced by dark crystal makers online.
You've already been influenced by a dark crystal maker. How I got you to do the podcast with me in the first place.
Is that it? Did you crystal me? Did you charge some crystals under the moon and then slip them under my pillow?
But do remember, we do have a Patreon page. So if you do want to go on to there, then you will find the next episode before everybody else hears it and some bonus content.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh no, thank you. It's been really good fun, as I said.
So we will see you next time.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.